Good evening. I'm Commissioner James Patterson, Audit Committee Chairperson. I'd like to call the Audit Committee meeting of the whole to order. There are no speakers for tonight. Correct myself. We have one speaker for tonight, Dr. Mack. Yeah, so even if you don't have him on the agenda, I'm going to allow him as a chair, to speak tonight. So, Dr. Mack, I think you'll have 3 minutes if I'm correct. Please approach the podium and present, please. Thank you.
Just good. Thank you. And I did sign up through the website as well early this morning, as I usually do. So I just want to get right to it. I know you guys got a lot on the agenda. Okay, I'm going to submit a report to you guys today. This report is submitted to the district to highlight some critical issues regarding early childhood education practices in the district's pre-K program. Based on my research, conversation with educators, and firsthand observations, it has become alarmingly clear that systemic instructional barriers are impeding student development and perpetuating achievement gaps that affect our most vulnerable learners. Okay, a few years ago, I conducted some research in early childhood as a part of my doctoral studies within the district, approved study, and published some recommendations in my book entitled Preschool Survival Guide. The purpose of the guide is to provide practical evidence-based strategies for closing the literacy and numeracy gap for urban students, particularly in Rochester. And I've shared this guide with leaders who I would not mention names because their names are not necessary, not only in the district, but also across the county. Despite sharing this guide with some of the district preschool teachers and leaders, I have since learned that key recommendations were not implemented, and they weren't supposed to be, but they were greatly suggested. More concerningly, recent reports confirmed that our students are continuing to enter grade school 2 to 3 years behind. That's a fact that we all know, okay? All right, so some of the, and one of the things that they're behind is reading, writing, and mathematics. All right, so through the follow-up conversations that I've had recently with pre-K teachers and some leaders in pre-K, I've uncovered some disturbing information, that I would call it. As a parent and as an educator, I would call it disturbing. Teachers reported that they are not permitted, only in the Rochester City School District, not permitted to directly teach foundational literacy and numeracy to pre-K students in pre-K classrooms. Some teachers even indicated that they had to, quote unquote, sneak instruction into their day, aware of the necessity for the student development. One other teacher operated under these conditions for nearly 17 years. And some of the parents in a private school that I also included in this process had reported that their students were doing stronger academically than the students that were compared in district-run schools. And this was a parent who had a sister who had a child in a district-run school. And so we need to make sure, this is just information, once again, that I would hope the report would respond positively to. We need to make sure that, our students are emotionally supportive environments and that they have routines and richness, but we also need to make sure that they're exposed to letters, numbers, and critical thinking throughout the day. So I have some recommendations here that the current pre-K curriculum implementation instructional strategies that we need to look at that we need to audit those. So the Rochester City School District, we can no longer delay this issue, people. And we are setting these students up for failure if we don't address these issues at the early stages. And I would hope that people who have been responsible for overseeing this process over the last few years, who are calling themselves leaders, are listening, because it's not the school board who we can fault for not taking care of this business. It's the people in leadership roles who had the responsibility of making sure that our kids had what they needed, didn't do the job, not doing the job, and guess what? Now I'm calling it out. The research is clear, and we need to address it. So kudos to those individuals who've gotten themselves to the next level, but the ones who are here, we need to make sure that moving forward that we're doing what we need to do to make sure our students have what we have. And this report will be submitted. I'll have copies for anyone else. I'll send those to the school board since we didn't get them through. A lot of times you don't get stuff through that's hand delivered, but I'll make sure you get them in the email. and hopefully you guys can set up some kind of committee to address this issue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Mack. And there are no other speakers in the audience, correct? Okay, I'm going to move forward then. The review and acceptance of the minutes from December 3rd, 2024, Audit Committee of the Whole. The minutes from the December 3rd, 2024 meeting are available online. Can I have a motion to accept the minutes?
Motion. Second.
Did you get that by Commissioner Griffin and President
Was
Simmons?
it Malloy? Was it Malloy who was the second? Oh, it was Simmons? Okay,
And President Simmons?
okay.
Is there a second? We have, yes. Any comments or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any nays?
Okay.
And it should be noted that Commissioner Elliott and Commissioner LeBron are online. You will note in the minutes that the Auditor General reviewed the Wilson Student Activity Fund report at the last meeting, but the report was not accepted by the board. Can I have a motion to accept the Wilson SAF audit at this time? Can I have a motion, please?
Motion.
Vice President Malloy, and a second?
Griffin?
A second is
That was
by Commissioner Griffin. Any comments or discussion at this time? All in favor? Aye.
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 That's 7-0. Thank you. I would like to turn over the next session of our agenda to our Auditor General, Ms. Henry Wheeler, to facilitate the Audit Committee discussion items.
Tonight, we have Matt Montalvo from Drescher Malecki, our external auditors, to present our external audit plan for the year-end financial audit for the year ending 6/30/25. Matt?
Good evening, everyone. So I'm here to present the audit plan for the district's year ended June 30th, 2025 audit. I'll get right into it. The first slide, this is our audit team. Most of the members are returning members. Amy Hainsley served as the senior auditor in the prior year. She was promoted this year to manager, so she'll be returning as a manager. And then Schwartz Abelard moved into the senior auditor position. He'll also be our compliance specialist, so he'll handle the federal compliance audit as well. So it's good to have returning members that have experience with the district. As far as the products of our audit, so this is the external audit. Typically, it's a snapshot as of June 30th, 2025, so a very high level but comprehensive review of your financial statements. So from a board perspective, when you're making your budget decisions, it's imperative to have reliance on your financial records as they're presented to you, because you need to understand how your fund balances and the restrictive nature of some of your balances in making those budget decisions. So it is a backwards look as of June 30th, 2025. We perform a lot of the field work in September and October, but it is a snapshot as of that point and a look at the activity during the fiscal year. As part of that audit, we do look at the internal controls, but how they impact the financial statements. So it's not a process review on any particular area. It's a look at your high-level controls and how they impact the inputs, the final inputs into the financial statement. So, for example, the internal controls over your cash processes. Are you doing bank reconciliations? Are there reviews over that process? That's what we would look at to then ensure that those cash balances that are reported to the board and to outside third parties are fairly stated and reliable. We also issue an opinion on your compliance with federal programs. So a lot of your major federal programs, significant dollars that really provide imperative funding for educational programs. Your compliance is, the compliance of the district impacts that funding. So we provide that opinion. And then we also look at your extra classroom activity funds and contract for excellence reports. And then we will also issue an auditor communication letter, and this provides any significant issues or exceptions that came up during the audit, any critical communications to the board that you need to be made aware of. As far as our overall strategy, it really starts today in presenting that audit plan to the district and the board. We take certainly any feedback from management and the board as far as any risks that you're aware of that we should be aware of before we perform the audit. When we actually start our field work and our planning phases of the audit, we meet with a lot of the district departments and gain an understanding or if there's any changes in it in the internal control structure or any risks that could impact the audit. That's how we design our audit plan and determine the real areas of focus and the high-level risk areas of focus for the audit. After performing those tests of your account balances, we also do outside confirmations. We will assist in preparing the financial statement reports, the independent auditors' reports, and that is what is presented to the audit committee, the board, in the December meeting, and then final issuance that go on to the regulatory agencies. Some of the recent developments out there, certainly this is more of a budget impact, but the federal programs, the COVID funding that you've experienced over the last 4 or 5 years, starting to wind down. So that was really a big benefit for not only school districts, but public entities that experienced a shutdown and a reduction in their lost revenues. This really helped fill that gap and fund a lot of your operating programs. So a significant impact when you're looking at your budget going forward. You're going through a pretty significant system implementation of your financial software. That doesn't go into effect until the new fiscal year, but could have an impact as far as some of the reports that we look at subsequent to year end. As far as public sector staffing, so this is more geared in succession planning. This has been a big focus in the public sector over the last probably 5+ years, but going forward, still seeing a lot of that, kind of boomer generation, those significant amount of retirements at the same time. And it does impact, how the operations, the continuity of the operations, and really that succession planning going forward. Making sure that any key turnover in your staff you're prepared for, you have cross training and that next level of professionals coming in. And then just some on the federal level, the U.S. Department of Education, certainly a lot of uncertainty that could impact school districts going forward as far as funding some of those major programs. As far as Title I and some of the really critical programs that school districts operate. Now kind of switching gears, the recent developments and new governmental accounting standards. These are pronouncements that the school districts are required to implement each year. The more critical ones for the year ended 2025, GASB statement number 101, that's regarding your compensated absences liability and what you project that the district is obligated to pay in the future. So there has been some impacts. We've gone through several audits for our calendar year-end clients that had to implement 101, and we are seeing some increases to those liabilities. Some items that didn't have to be recognized and captured in that liability in the past are now being brought down. So we'll talk a lot about the obligations and liabilities, those long-term items as it relates to the district, but 101 is probably the most significant one for this fiscal year. Our audit strategy as it relates to the more key risk areas, certainly cash and investments that's always a big area just because of the liquidity and the nature of volume in the dollars from a audit standpoint. So we do an external confirmation of those account balances as opposed to just taking those account balances and bank statements that are provided. We go right to the source and get that outside confirmation. And then, as I noted earlier, we do review bank reconciliations as well as your collateral levels. Excuse me. Some of the other key areas, your receivables or revenue recognition. What we look at here is really the availability of the dollars. So you have a significant amount of dollars that are due from other governments at year end. So whether it be the federal government, the state government, that you run programs and that is reimbursed by those entities. What we're looking for is, are those dollars coming in after year end or shortly after year end and allowing you to use that in your next year's budget? So are those receivables real at year end? So that's the significant portion there. And then on a risk level government-wide, a lot of it's surrounding these long-term contingent liabilities right now. So it's important to value those. It's extremely difficult because there's a lot of assumptions and a lot of estimates that go into projecting what these numbers will be. Certainly on the legal side, that has become a big focus for large governments right now in projecting out those legal liabilities that are potentially to come due in the near future. Also your self-insurance and your other post-employment benefits, so retiree health insurance benefits that you pay out in the future. So as a large government entity, you have very large benefits that are paid out to employees in your retirement system. Those rely on a lot of expert opinions and estimates. So from our perspective, we review those assumptions, talk to those experts, review their reports, and that's included in our audit of your financial statements. As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of large federal and state funding. The compliance is imperative, so we put a lot of risk in the compliance and the analysis of your major federal programs. So that is a big component of the audit. We look at a lot of the controls around compliance, and we test those major programs to provide that opinion on the uniform guidance. Some of the other areas, capital assets, capital projects. Again, the district being a significantly large entity, you're running a lot of capital projects, a lot of funding sources. So there is a risk level there. We spend a lot of time on the capital assets and capital projects. On the fund balances, so these are your equity position. This is a lot of scrutiny on the state level as far as the restriction on certain funds and what you can use that fund balance for. So we want to make sure that it's properly classified, so you as a board, you're aware of the restrictions on your fund balances. And then we certainly look at accounts payable, accrued liabilities, a lot of the compliance with general municipal law, and your spending of those dollars. As far as a timing perspective of our field work, right now we are entering the planning phase, the preliminary testing. We're in communication with the district really throughout the whole fiscal year as far as answering questions and having discussions on how they would impact the audit. But we do, over the summer, we will be in communication with the accounting department and putting requests out, gathering information, like I said, collaborating on questions and concerns. But our primary field work really kicks off beginning the week of September 22nd. That's when we're on site at the district. We're having those narrative discussions, questionnaires with the departments, assessing that risk and performing that substantive testing that I talked about in those key audit areas. Once we wrap up with that, it is a pretty quick turnaround, so we have a lot of staff here. The district has been in the past very, very coordinated on keeping that process going and that timeline and hitting those marks. So we expect that that'll continue this year. Review the financial statements required by the city. So a lot of those reports and financial schedules go to them by October 15th, but no later than October 20th. We don't, like I said, we don't anticipate any issues there. And then the full draft ACFR will be prepared and ready by November 7th. So then we can have this discussion in December on those draft statements, so they're ready for issuance, and move on to the final issuance of those reports. Just a couple last minute items. These are really kind of our overarching standards as auditors. Independence, that's a critical component of our audit, especially external audit, because we're providing our independent opinion on the financial statements, that they fairly represent your financial position. We need to be independent. All of our auditors need to be free of conflicts of interest with the district, so no relationships that would impair our independence. And then the last item is the consideration of fraud. Certainly, that's an area we never want to, hear the word fraud, but it does have a significant impact on the audit. So if there's anything that, the district management or board is aware of, please communicate that to us before we start our audit fieldwork, because that would significantly impact the scope. On the flip side, if we become aware of any fraud, we're responsible to bring that to this group as soon as we become aware. Okay, so that's the audit plan for the external audit for the year ended June 30th, 2025. If you have any questions for me, I put my contact information as well as Amy's. Feel free to contact me, but I'll take any questions or concerns from management now. With the board.
So what we'll do as far as questions, let's see. We're going to start from my left and move down toward my right, and then we'll go up to the screen to the two commissioners that are online.
No questions.
No questions.
Just a general question with slide number 7, and we recognize the increase with healthcare costs, as you talked about the contingencies and planning for those, as well as those grants on the following slide. Are there any guidance, general guidance outlines that you have received around what to expect? For example, this past year, I think insurance popped up like 20%, and so that's crazy. But when you're making those assumptions, you need to try your best to fall in that line. What are you hearing?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the focus of our audit is a lot of the times it's backwards looking. So when we're projecting out those liabilities and those assumptions, those are based on estimates as of the end of the fiscal year. But I think what you're referring to is a lot of more forward-looking budget impacts, and absolutely critical when you're projecting out your budgets. So I would say the district management, I'm sure there's consultants that you are contracted with. So when you're going through that budget process, those would be definitely the individuals that you want to talk to, your healthcare brokers. What are we seeing as far as increases in estimates?
Yeah.
But that 20% range is not. Yeah, that's not out of the
Crazy.
ordinary.
I know. I said maybe I can cheat, and you might have some friends that you can.
I can tell you, in my company, we're experiencing the same things. That's about.
Thank you.
I appreciate the question.
Any questions? Any questions? All right. Next.
No questions.
And going up to the online, Commissioner Elliott.
Yes, thank you. So I'd be interested in, and Anissa, you can correct me if I'm wrong in asking this question, but I would be interested in some more attention to be placed on the Oracle system to ensure that we are spending correctly. So I'll just leave it at that, but I'd like there to be particular attention on the Oracle system and the process of financing that, and have we been integral in that whole process? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Elliott. Commissioner LeBron? Any questions?
Commissioner Patterson, would you like me to respond at least to the question? No?
That's entirely up to you.
Oh, okay, I didn't know if you wanted me to, but generally speaking, it would be outside of the scope of the external financial audit this year to evaluate that cost. That would be in a separate engagement, but there is going to be work done by the internal function.
All right, did you?
Thank you.
Okay, I just want to make sure you received that information. Once again, Commissioner LeBron? All right, she does not appear to be on, so we're going to move forward, I guess, eh? Let's see. All right, again, sub B, Office of Auditor General update.
Excuse me, did we want to take a motion for this
Oh,
particular plan?
you are correct. I'm sorry. Thank you. Let's see. I would like to request a motion to accept the 2025 External Audit Plan. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I caught Vice President Malloy,
Then what's the screen?
and who seconded?
On the screens first.
Elliot.
Commissioner
Did
Elliott?
not second it. I thought I'd made the motion, but I must have not heard someone else who made it.
Okay, so you can second it then. I'll Vice President Malloy will motion, and Commissioner Elliott will second that. Thank you. Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The ayes have it. Ms. Henry Wheeler, can you provide your update at this time?
Absolutely. Thank you, Matt. We look forward to seeing you this year.
Thank you. Good evening.
I have tonight Jacqueline Farabelle is joining me from my team. She is going to work the slides as we go through our temporary employment services review. To not belabor it, so high level in our general audit process, it is intended to be collaborative, and we do review findings, observations, and ensure that management understands the control concerns that are identified in the audit. It happened to be inside of Dr. Miller's area, and they have already started remediating the various concerns noted, so I did want to put that out there. As far as the background and the scope, we understand that maintaining sufficient staffing levels has been a challenge nationally. As it relates to how we function internally, we do use a third-party agency to help us with paraprofessionals, clerical,
Excuse
food
me.
service.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but my screens are dead and I can't see that even with my glasses on. Is there any way to enlarge that screen? I don't want you to go any further and I can't follow along.
Can you see, you
I
can't see that one either?
see the
Okay.
wording, even with my glasses. It's too small.
Can you look
My
on,
screen, both of my screens are down.
can you look on my screen here? Because I can tilt it your way then.
Go ahead.
All right.
Sorry. But
Real problem. We use the third-party agency for covering, like, filling vacancies or temporary absences inside of our departments and to handle peak workloads. We've intentionally, in some cases, we heard from Dr. Miller, chose to use some temporary resources to support, like, our long-term project of Oracle and to backfill some personnel as well. Our annual spend with the temporary staffing is approximately $6 million a year. And we just wanted to make sure that was understood. In addition, at the time of our review, there was not an executed contract. However, an RFP had taken place. I think it was just a paperwork issue where there was a concern associated with renewing on an annual basis versus already having an RFP that would cover them until 2027. For our scope of work, we evaluated the contractual relationship. We were looking at the process for obtaining the temporary staff, controlling the environment as far as how we controlled the utilization and performance of that staff. And we looked at a period from 2022 up to 25. Our first recommendations around the contract, again, it's $6 million a year spend. Over the last 10 years, about $48 million in this particular area. There wasn't an active contract, but the great news is there was an RFP, so this was the vendor we should have done business with and did have an agreement to do business with the organization. One concern we had is not all temporary employment jobs are filled on a daily basis. This heavily impacts schools, especially in the para and clerical area. And currently, as our relationship reads, we have an exclusive relationship with the firm that we're using. And the challenge then becomes, one of our recommendations is to possibly use a second vendor if we can't fulfill all of the need that we have, so schools aren't without the support that they're requiring. Under protocols and procedures, I know we generally have this challenge across the district in some areas. We're looking for additional protocols and procedures to really clarify. Sometimes we have operating practices, but not documented procedures to ensure consistency. So we really wanted to make sure that some of that documentation takes place. In addition, we want to make sure monitoring's improved generally across the process. And we want to make sure we're really clear and intentional as a district to determine how long we allow temporary resources to work inside of the district. We had some that were there for years. Some of that was supported by the Oracle project, but there could have been other jobs greater than 90 days that were there. So again, we're looking for protocols in areas such as duration of employment, rates, record-keeping expectations in the various departments, and making sure we had escalation procedures when operating management doesn't do what they need to in approving temporary personnel time. We also want to make sure that there is senior-level justification and approval when there is temporary resources that are in extended durations. Under roles and responsibilities, there is lots of hands, and this is one of those complicated areas because while Office of Human Capital is responsible for kind of the oversight, it's hitting so many different budgets and cost centers, it's not theirs. They are not responsible for the cost centers, it's each individual's cost center, and that makes it a little bit more challenging to really manage this, and that's one of the challenges we've had as a district from a management standpoint. But we're really looking for more defined roles of what OHC does, what finance does, what managers need to do, as well as being consistent about what we expect from the temporary employees. We also want clarity surrounding the budget development process because the budget's developed more so in finance, and yet it's not clear exactly who's going to manage the dollars and how that works. So we really want to get a better clarity surrounding the defined roles and procedures. Again, under financial, under budget, because there's so many budgets involved, someone needs to take on ownership of monitoring the overall spend as it relates to this area. So there's a lack of monthly monitoring that's specific to this area because it's hitting so many cost centers, and we really need to look from a global standpoint saying, what is the amount of money that we're really expending in this area, and what do we need to do differently? In 23 and 24, we noted we were significantly under budget. Even for the current year, it won't be as bad, but we'll be under budget again. Looking into next year, it does appear that we're closer to what our spending level is as it relates to temporary spending, but the challenge becomes if it's not managed, it can easily go over. So we're really hoping that we use historical information, we ensure that we budget the right number and not under budget in this area, which causes us to have to pull funds from other locations, which is not the best practice. For expense monitoring, one area is very hard to manage the expense when you can't completely handle the absentees. If there's an absent individual that is a para, well, the student under the IEP may need that para, and therefore you have to find someone to fill it. If we don't fill the job, then we're going to be out of compliance. So we really want to make sure, and just this past month, OHC pushed out to the organization communication and the intent to have leaders be more intentional about managing staff attendance. Staff attendance is a trigger because if the staff attendance, not only does it impact student achievement, it also would result in additional temporary personnel expense. So that is something that needs to be focused and targeted. Another area is we look at when a temporary employee, when we refer an individual that we want to have, maybe a school might have a particular para, or someone knows a clerical or a special expertise that's used, the term is called payrolling. We're bringing the person, sending them over to our third-party location and saying, hey, if you put them on your payroll so that they can work for us, we can have them do this work for us. Well, in that particular situation, they would then charge us a markup for the individual who's doing this temporary work for us. One of the additional recommendations is to determine, is it cost-effective to put some of those people on our own books, Or even with some of the temps that we're hiring, is it more cost-effective than the markups that we're currently paying to have some of these people come on board? Now, there are going to be times where there's additional services in very hard-to-reach areas that we can use a third party, but if there are times where we internally can identify the individual, then we really want to look at the cost benefits. So that's exactly what I'm asking for, both cost benefit as well as really working intentionally to reduce the temporary expense at the district, because it can be unmanaged and it could be a challenge. Under invoice payments, we noted that the vendor sends the invoice directly to budget. That was over the years implemented because it's hitting so many cost centers, and we need to make sure that there's funding in the various budget lines. The challenge becomes they did not formally send it over to HC to give them an opportunity to validate the bill prior to payment. So that became a challenge, and that's something that HC is working with to ensure they get the bill first and do all validation necessary. In addition, temporary employment time is not verified for accuracy on the bill. We need to do validation procedures to make sure the person in fact worked, what days, what hours, et cetera. And that is not just an OHC thing, it's also in the various buildings. Under monitoring, one of the things our temporary service is required to do, or identified in the contract, is we're supposed to have a 97% fulfillment rate, which means 97% of our jobs potentially would be filled. Unfortunately, that's not happening, and we really need to improve our monitoring to ensure that our vendors are performing as we need to. So we're really looking for the required biweekly reporting and active monitoring of that point. Timely entry is another area that has come up. Employees' work hours, they don't always enter in the system timely, which causes problems with our managers being able to approve prior to the payroll being run for these groups of employees. So that's an area that also needs to be able to be improved. In addition, we want to make sure that when the payroll comes through for temporary employees and managers have to approve, we want to ensure that there's some sort of documentation or log that's maintained in each department, so they actually are validating against something. There can be times where the employee might have left early, come in late. We should be formally documenting the time, like a timesheet or process in some way, to ensure we really know what we're paying for. So that is another area under timely entry. The timely approval gets a little bit bigger. We have managers just not following through and ensuring that the approval takes place. Unfortunately, in the process, OHC is put in a position to have to allow the payroll to go through, so they verify, or they at least allow the approval of payroll for individuals that have not been verified at the building level. And so the difficulty with that is it's almost a blind approval. There's no way HC could know who was working at a school because they're not there. But unfortunately, should the third-party employee be penalized because we're not doing what we're supposed to do? No, that's not okay either. So this is a process that needs to be tightened down. When we looked at it and started analyzing the data, there was on average about 90 entries a week that were not being approved. And on holiday weeks, it could have averaged around 200 plus entries where it did not get payroll validated for the temporary personnel. And it put OHC in a bind to actually allow it to go through. In 24-25, there were at least 1,400 temporary employees' timesheets that didn't get approved by the manager, which resulted in $570,000 in time being blanket approved. Now, we're not saying this isn't time work potentially, and we don't believe the entire number would be not valid time. But if you don't validate it, you don't know what's accurate. And so that is an area that is going to happen. The biggest issue really is they're managing a process where individual managers are not held accountable, and we need that to roll up the food chain because they don't report to OHC. So this is a place where there's going to be a partnership where the follow-up needs to happen, and there has to be consequences, even to the point of if you cannot do what you're supposed to do and approve, then you probably don't deserve to have temporary employees. So that was one of the recommendations as well. We need both escalation and we need a consequence. If there's no approval, then we can't continue to do our business this way. Lastly is reporting. When we look at the reporting, we find that the third party we're working with, they have been responsive, but the current reporting that we receive could be modified or improved or enhanced to make it a little bit easier for our staff to be able to monitor that they're doing their job effectively. When we tried to look at different reports, we had some difficulty to really see if we are meeting all of the areas within the contract. So we're really asking management to look at the reporting requirements and ask for specific data elements needed to improve the practice. That concludes this one. Are there
you, Auditor
questions on
General.
this? Shall I go on to the next, or any questions on this one, or can we
Now,
move
why don't we
forward?
take some questions right now, one to
Okay.
two questions from each board member if they have any. And I'll start with myself at this point in time. So you spoke relative to supplying and reporting. And a question that you and I have spoken about, in the past is, if not in the present, vendors and them fulfilling their contract and, supplying statistical data that depicts if the program is successful or not. So I'd like that also to be one of my recommendations, that we make sure that, if we have these vendors and, we're paying them, do we pay them in full? Do we pay them at the end of the contract to make sure they supply us with the statistical data that would indicate whether their program is successful or not? That's something that I'd like us to look into.
So we've concluded this particular audit, but this is one of the things that's actually embedded in this recommendation. And Dr. Miller and his team have already started requesting the various information needed. They're able to see some things, but what we're really looking for is enhanced reporting, so it makes it crystal clear how they're performing.
Absolutely.
So that is some of the work that is already started.
All right, and just my second question, do we pay these vendors in full at the beginning of the contract, or do we pay them partial and that the rest at the end of the contract, or?
So this is just like payroll. If a person works, then at the end of the week, that person gets paid. So we pay as we go along, and there's like a weekly pay that happens for the employees, and then we pay throughout the month as the bills come in.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'm going to go in reverse order this time, back up to the screen. Commissioner Elliott, and then Commissioner LeBron.
Thank you. So, Anissa, what is the percentage of the temporary employees that we hire in the district?
Could you pose your question again, Commissioner?
Yeah, the percentage of temporary employees that we hire in our district.
I guess she's asking, do we have a percentage of temps?
Yeah, people that go from the temporary payroll to the district's payroll.
That would be a question for Dr. Miller.
Yeah, Commissioner, I can speak to that. We have, on May 2nd, as an example, on May 2nd, as an example, we had 167 employees hired through tests, okay? So if we have about 6,000 employees overall, just to give you a sense of who these staff are, 11 were daily clerical subs, 17 were long-term clerical subs, 4 were food service helpers, 4 were lunchroom aides, which are substitutes for the lunchrooms, 9 were daily paraprofessional substitutes, 99 were long-term paraprofessionals, 7 were long-term teaching assistants, and then 16 were working on special projects such as Oracle. And that's a
Right, but
total of 167 people.
Meaning that we move them from their temporary employment agency and they become staff for the district?
Yeah, that's a great question. So some of these people hired through tests, such as clerical, food service helpers, lunchroom aides, and even paraprofessionals, there are daily substitutes. So they work as daily subs. But then we also have...
I think what I'm trying to find out is, or do we not? I'm just trying to find out if we look at some of those temporary hires and we've said, they may be good for us to bring on permanently to our district. Do we have that percentage is what I'm asking?
Yeah,
Or do we do that?
Yep, so for example, we have 99 long-term paraprofessionals. Now, many of those long-term paraprofessionals are long-term teaching assistants. We work to hire as our own employees.
Okay.
We prefer to hire our own employees. We do not want to rely on temporary services. But for the titles I named, we have to. And so our goal is to transition those temporary staff to become our full-time employees. However, we have an agreement with the employment store tests that we will, we can only hire them on to be our full-time employees after they've completed their required length of service at tests, which is typically 3 months.
Yeah, what I'm just thinking is that, we have an opportunity to see those test employees in action. And, we may want to, at some point, if they're good, look at bringing them in for on our payroll. So that's why it gives an opportunity to see the good ones versus the ones that are not, need to improve. So that's why I was asking that question. Thank you, Dr. Miller. And another question I have is that on one of those slides, I think it was slide 5, I saw that the district has 10 million without an executed contract. Can you explain that, Anissa? If I read it right.
So what happened was an RFP was performed, and normally when we perform an RFP, we'll have an RFP for the first year, and you have to renew it. It's set for a 5-year period, but you must renew it every single year for the next 4 years, the 4 remaining years. The renewal did not take place, so then there was no executed contract. We were still following the information from the RFP and the original RFP information, but there was not an executed agreement for that year. So that was over the course of another 1.5 years, and that is the reason why it had 10 million spent out of with no executed contract.
So have we corrected that?
That has been corrected, yes.
All right, thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Deputy Turner, did you have anything? You're good. Okay, she's good. All right, you can go ahead, go forward.
Okay.
I got a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, yes, thank you. Commissioner LeBron, did you have any questions?
I don't, thank you.
All right. Okay, we'll start from my right and we'll move to my left. Commissioner Griffin.
Thank you, Anissa and Ms. Wheeler, for that information. I have a couple of questions here. I'm glad to hear that we have finally started hiring a lot of the temp workers permanent throughout the district. However, I would like to see how we did it from last year to this year, how many were hired, because there has been a big concern of mine from the beginning with the temp agencies and how cost-effective they are with the district versus having in-house temp services through the district. So my question is really twofold. Would it be cost-effective for us to do this in-house as far as the temporary services versus having it outside? And then I have another part of that is when we're doing these hiring these people from the temp agencies, I have concerns that they're sitting there at the temp agency over years, and this is factual information, and they were not hired by the district. I know there's a custodian out there that has not been hired by the district and has worked for the district for over 5 years. And we know that that person at this time would have be able to do the service as well, or they wouldn't still be with that temp agency. So how are we tracking these workers that have been with TESS for, I'm sorry, scratch that, but how are we recording the information regarding each temporary worker and how long they've been there? Because I know some have exceeded 3 months, and knowing that their track record is good, but we're not hiring them. How are they being overlooked over those years? That's a big concern of mine. So did you get all those questions?
Well, actually, I can answer a few of them.
Second.
Hold on a minute.
Okay.
So we're going to answer one question with two parts, and then we'll move forward to our second question.
Okay. The first one is, recommendation 6 is exactly perform the cost benefit of seeing if it is more cost-effective for the district to have the temps in-house. So what you're talking about is one of the recommendations in the report. This,
For the district years ago, I was an in-house temp. That's why I reflected on that. And it actually worked better that way years ago. I think like Maurice Bell and Gail Shakes and everybody worked inside at that time, along with Dr. Pecoraro. But at the end of the day, it was cost-effective, and it also, it definitely was beneficial to the overall, to the schools and to in-house.
so
What we're going to do here, so we stay in order, is we're going to allow that question to be answered, and then we're going to go on to your next question. Deputy Turner wants to respond to your second part, so let her answer your second part, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Commissioner. That was a great question. So one of the advantages of having temporary employees is being able to see, one, if they enjoy the work, if they're doing a good job, if it's a fit for them, and also for the district. And oftentimes, when folks have completed their 3 months and they're doing a really great job and there's a vacancy, whoever's in that department, primarily in the schools or food service, individuals want to hire them, and we do hire them. There are sometimes concerns where you also get to see the other aspect where folks' attendance in the 3 months might be really, really bad, or they might work for a month and then find something else permanent somewhere else, and then they choose to leave. And a few incidents where folks were not fulfilling the job responsibilities, we've also terminated their temporary employment.
Okay, I guess, and I appreciate your response, but I guess my concern is if they were that bad and they've been there for 2 to 3 years and their attendance was affected. So, I mean, I'm just concerned about the ones that have been with the temporary agencies over the 3-month period, yet we overlook them to be hired and hire somebody outside. My concern is that that information and that data is out there, and I think that that's what we need to look at. Where is that data that states that these people, we have temporary workers that have been with us longer than 3 months, more than a year, and they have not been hired, but yet they're good enough to stay with the temp agency? Do we have that data available for the record?
We can
And if you
certainly
don't-
get it, yes. We'll put it in the board log, and we can certainly get that.
So we're gonna board log it, but in the open meetings law, if that information is board logged, we need to do it again in the open meetings at the next meeting. Is that's correct?
No,
That-
the general counsel is saying that's not correct, but that answer log is
not how that
available for the public review. I'll defer to general counsel, but he was nodding his head no.
It is
I would
educational
defer
law.
to general counsel.
Again, so we stay in order here. General Counsel, would you mind responding to that question?
Thank you, Commissioner. No, if it does not have to be readdressed at another board meeting unless the board raises it again at another board meeting. Again, I think as Dr. Turner was beginning to say, I believe some elements of the board log are public, and so if it's provided there, it will be available. But there is nothing that says it has to be brought back for another discussion unless the board specifically directs that. So the board could absolutely put it back on the agenda at another meeting if that's the board's wish, but there is no requirement as far as I'm aware that happens by default.
Okay, can you please, for the record, can you please just give me that information that's saying that we don't have to bring it back? So then I won't have to put it out there to the public for them to be confused about open meetings law and what it pertains to.
I think I just said.
I just asked for the codes or what it is.
I
That's all
can't.
I want.
I can't.
Let him
answer a
respond,
negative.
please.
Yep. I just responded to the best I can. I can, send you an email or something like that if that will suffice. But I think I just answered the question.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I would like that number, that information that you got there from, saying that we don't have to give it back to the open meeting, because the open meeting law says that we don't have to do it publicly again to the public, and if it was a public question. So I just want that information, then I can relay it to the public at the next meeting, if you give it to me by email. Thank you.
All right, so do you have a second question?
Second question, I thought you had, did you have it, Anissa? It basically pertained to the one with the. I think they were all answered.
Okay, yeah, they were answered.
We already
Okay.
answered the two.
All right, thank you. So we're going to move. We're going to move. we're going to move forward. They were answered, so, President?
Yeah, I just, first and foremost, I like the way this audit spells out because it does speak to a lot of things that I've heard over time. And with our temporary employees, would you say there's a great degree of turnover typically with them, right? I mean, I think that's standard for any temp agency, but it's a lot with this particular just in this district. And I do believe that some of these protocols, clarity of roles and things of that nature will help to ensure folks have the clarity of role or what have you. So we talked a little bit about people applying after being a long-term employee, but I would say we're not really retaining most of them, right?
Yeah, one of the things that we're doing in working with Tess is to ensure that there's improved onboarding, training, and support so that people that are hired know what it is they're doing and what the expectations are, how to get help when they need help, and how they can continue to grow in the role and to grow in our district. So that's what we're working on, both internally for our own hires, but also with temporary services.
Okay. And then on slide 13, where we talked about, that one was very alarming, the timesheets and 570K of time being blanket approved. Yeah, that's alarming, and that's 24, 25, that's this year, right? And so guardrails and protocols are so very important, and so it sounds like we're moving in the direction of putting, I heard Anissa say things are already being put in place to navigate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice President.
Thank you. Similar to what President Simmons was just talking about, I really like that we have recommendations that are in place and that there are plans to remediate a lot of this. It is very worrying. I just have two questions, and then other questions that I have I will put onto the board log. So I see that it says there's a markup of 33.5% for payroll, which is done by Tess. Can someone just explain the 33.5% markup?
It was potentially a negotiated rate, and so if I make $25 an hour, they will multiply that $25 by 33.5%, and that is going to be the rate we're going to be invoiced. Whereas the employee gets 25, the cost for them onboarding that employee, they're going to have to pay the employee portion of taxes and things like that, and they're truly their employee, not ours, so it's the cost to put them on the books on our behalf.
Okay, and so I guess that kind of lends itself to the next question that I had was, how are TESS employees evaluated? Obviously, they're evaluated by the agency, not by our CSD.
So we have the right at any point in time to say, you can just take that one back and we will not have that one again. So we can at any time say no thank you to someone who is a TESS employee. We can reach out and say, no, this person didn't work out, we don't want that person to return. So we do have, the luxury of it is, if it were an employee, we would generally, if it was an employee, have to worry about a whole union process and a longer duration and a more complicated process when it's an employee. But when it's a third-party temporary agency, we can say, okay, you know what? That last hour you just worked was it for us, and you're going to have to go home now. So we can always send them right on the spot. And so it actually makes it a lot easier for us if someone's not working out to have them not return.
Okay, so I guess in terms of that 33.5% then, are we paying additional fees on top of that to TESS to contract with them?
That is the fee.
Okay, great, thank you so much.
Commissioner Santiago.
So with this plan, when will the recommendations start to be accomplished from the administration? So the recommendations from the audit plan?
So there's multiple dates and multiple parts to it. Some have already started. I think the latest date might be December 26th, when there's a long-term cost benefit process that they're going to have to go through. So what usually happens, and I kind of talked about the process at the beginning, we make sure that the risks are understood by management. Some things are, I could quickly fix that, and I'll have that done in another month or so. Certain procedures, when school starts, what we expect from buildings, et cetera. But there are some where you're talking about things that require longer-range plans, and they had to put later dates on those things. They were responsive to the various items, but as it relates to the dates that are identified, they really have components and collaboration with others in order to build some of the processes to fix them.
And so my question is, we have a administration that will be changing soon. And so just off the question of fidelity, ensuring that these recommendations are accomplished in the best way possible.
I'm still here.
Yeah, well, you're still here, but there's an administration that still has to strategize on how those things will be done. And so I'm just wondering, how are we making sure the bridge connects so that the work doesn't fall?
So actually, I did run into Dr. Rosser, who actually mentioned that he valued audit as a role and thought it was very good in support of the things that we do to identify how to make things better. But in addition, we would then follow up, and since I'm still here, whoever, with Dr. Miller being over HC, many of these dates will be very close. I mean, many of the dates are July type, over the summer type items. But as management changes, we then will circle back with whoever the new manager is and say, hey, are you aware of these particular things? And you notice that happened somewhat with like the graduation audit. There were a lot of changes that happened, but it didn't make us go away as far as doing follow-up and saying, hey, where are you with this? We still need something to happen. So we take that on to keep the consistency.
Commissioner, if I could add, our goal is to have almost all of these accomplished before the start of the school year in September.
Okay, very good. All right, if there's any additional questions by my colleagues, please submit those to the board doc. I'd appreciate it. Anissa, would you like to continue?
Yes, thank you. Next, we just want to kind of talk about our work plan. It'll cover some items that the board has been talking about, but we did walk through. Just want to let you know I'm still here to help the board and support the board in providing oversight responsibilities by having independent and objective assessments of areas, and that's generally what we do. Specifically, when we walk through the process, we do go through a broad range of interviews with various district personnel in different areas and realms. So we'll hit the various union functional areas in buildings, senior leadership team, a random selection of individuals, look at audit concerns, repetitive things inside the board question logs, audit controls testing, we look at our budget, we look at industry trends. We try to understand things that'll impact education, significant financial items that come up, and risks of penalties, as well as the complexity of certain areas that happen, and we want to make sure that we're looking at what's new. One thing that is informative and that's up on the screen is kind of looking at some of the trends that are going on in internal audit in the industry. We did take the time to glance and see over the last year, what is the comptroller's office looking at and what do they find to be important, because they always can show up. And they're in the areas of financial management, information technology, claims, and payroll. In addition, just looking at national audit areas such as the Institute of Internal Audit and the Internal Audit Foundation, they're talking about similar things: cybersecurity, business continuity, human capital, and digital disruption. And so it just is an acknowledgement that there's a data security issue that's going on, and that's really raises the element of technology in our place. I think that post-COVID, that just got a little out of control with things like cybersecurity and AI and business interruption, et cetera. Talent management and retention has consistently been a challenge across the board. So those are just things that are happening in industry information. From the various interviews and also even assessing risks, the top concerns that came up were Oracle, our leadership transition, financial management, human capital, payroll, accountability, supervision, and safety. And there's a lot of repetition, it seems, every year, the things that we're concerned about. But first and foremost, I think Oracle, with the size of this implementation, it being a comprehensive business implementation across all of the core processes, some of the feedback that came back, hey, it's an unknown and a new control environment. We don't know how it's going to work. And so that's an unknown. Whenever you have an unknown, people are afraid. We have undelivered functionality. Are we going to get everything that we thought out of the system when we're ready to turn on day one? Is it going to do all the things that we thought it would do when we walked forward saying that we selected Oracle as a product? What are the resources required to implement and maintain this system? And really having an understanding, there were concerns in that area, as well as the heavy use of consultants, because we needed consultants to either backfill jobs or help implement, et cetera. And now the question becomes, do we have the bench strength internally, because we really needed to use an expertise? the implementation methodology, as well as the costs. In the implementation methodology, we really were looking to get some change in the business side, and what I kept hearing was it's a business transformation. We identified a product and we're trying to implement this product using best practices, and sometimes our practices aren't the best. So you have the challenge of making sure we really do know and understand what our internal needs are and being proactive enough to make those changes, as well as the costs associated with implementation. Lastly, there were concerns surrounding testing and training because it's something new. So that's what came out of Oracle. When we look at leadership transition, yet again, we have another leadership transition. That's always a challenge as an organization. The loss of institutional knowledge when you lose kind of the top three of the organization is like, okay, what's going to happen now? And how do we make sure there's the continuity, similar to what Commissioner Santiago kind of brought up? How do we make sure the right things continue to happen and we stay on the right path of decisions that have been made? People become fearful of change, and that happens again and again, and it causes a certain amount of instability in the organization because we really don't know what to expect with the change that's coming. And then it does affect staff morale, so we don't want people to become so concerned about change that they don't stay with the district and continue to do the work that needs to happen. The next area is financial management. This is a new internal control system, new financial management system. There's a concern as it relates to that. There's uncertain times because we're dealing with unstable revenue sources. We don't necessarily know what cuts might happen with our funding sources. The budget process was new. We had a new leadership in that process. There are concerns about the budget as a whole and whether there's funding for everything we wanted to do and needed to do. Is general fiscal responsibility, recognizing that fiscal responsibility belongs to everyone in the district, not just the finance team, and everyone needs to be responsible and accountable as it relates to how we spend. And transition in key positions. Our financial team has had quite a bit of transition also in those positions, and that makes another challenge. Moving on is overall with our 25-6 plan, you will note that the whole side is really about the Oracle implementation. As required and expected from the fiscal accountability legislation, we really need to be able to identify what the control environment is at the district, since the historical control environment, or what we used to operate under with PeopleSoft in our prior systems and processes, we knew what that was, and now we're coming into something new, so we need to get into system access. Who can do what in the system? Are the controls in place that need to limit ability for individuals? What are the controls that are inherently included in the system as information is processed throughout the system? Payroll is an area which is also going to be new under the system, and we want to do an audit inside of payroll to really understand how is payroll in the Oracle environment and what are the key controls. Same for accounts payable, financial reporting, and human capital management, which is a separate module of the system. So there's a financial side, and then there is kind of a human side of the system. So those are all Oracle implementation type work that needs to get done. Not sure how long it'll take as we get into what's in the system, but it is critical work that has to happen for us to become stable as a unit, as a whole, to really understand what our control environment as an organization. Vendor performance. That was all over. Various individuals brought this up. Vendor performance management, not only in the selection, and we kind of talked a little bit about it here today, and various commissioners have brought this. Hey, how are they doing? What do we have? How do we know they're doing what we paid them to do? And how do we know this is good? When we think about the budget, we have a plan to cut back on consulting dollars or contracts and things such as that. And the question becomes, how are we going to make the decisions to move forward with the certain vendors? And have we even evaluated, hey, is this really good money that we're putting after this? So I know it is, I've heard it fall on so many ears, and it is a very important topic because with our limited spending and how we're going to be cutting back in this area, it's critically important that when we do have these contracts, we actually are getting the value that we need out of the contracts and they're performing as expected. Annually, we do still do the financial audit. We are the facilitators, and we also review the ACFR. So that will always happen every year, and we're doing that. Student activity accounts, it is an actual separate financial opinion that our external auditors must give. We always need to do audits in that area to ensure that's functioning as it should. Specifically, that's the financial activities that are happening in school buildings with the students, just to make sure that we have a sound control environment. There's follow-up work that we're having. For example, we had a big special education audit this past year. We're going to be in this upcoming year checking in on them and see where they are with the special ed recommendations that have been issued to ensure that we've been making progress in that area, in addition to special projects and requests. Not that we'll probably have time for a lot of that because we have our hands full, but that would conclude the list of items.
Okay, thank you very much, Auditor General, and for a very thorough report. So thank you very much. So I begin with myself as far as questions at this point in time. So I'm looking at the screen 4 and 9 specifically. So the 2025-26 audit plan. In an effort to be going to slide 4 if you want also, but I want to go back to 9. So it talks about New York State Controller and industry audit trends, and you name a few areas there. But moving back down to 9, more specifically, I would like to recommend that also added to the audit plan in an effort to be transparent. I think all areas of the district should be audited. And one area that I haven't seen in 3 years that I've been here, now my 4th year, is also including the Office of, Counsel, General Counsel. I don't see that we're doing any audit in there. For example, you know, how many vendors, being attorney firms, are we working with? I think on the last meeting, there was something relative to it, listed all the firms or somewhere that we're working with, how much money is expended, you know, on issues that we deal with or they deal with, the counsel's office. How many firms are on retainer? Are we paying a retainer fee to have them on retainer? How many calls are made? How many minutes do those calls last? How much are we paying per minute? Things like that that are very important. And again, I bring you this expertise from, you know, my prior experience. But again, I think that this district, I think we're doing a good job being positive, moving forward with transparency. But I think we can do a better job always. So I would just make that a recommendation, you know, for the 25-26 audit plan.
Well, to be perfectly honest, I don't know, we have a lot on the plate, but specifically, any contract at the district would fall within the scope of under the vendor performance management evaluation, actually. For the scope in determining what items we are going to test, we'll do some sampling of the various contracts that the organization has. So we potentially would have something coming out of General Counsel's office and the various offices that we have inside of the district, in addition to the majority of the contracts are generally for educational type things, but it would still fall within the scope. We've also done contracts work within General Counsel's office, so we have done audits in that particular department.
Okay, so I'm asking you specifically, I have specific questions, specific things that I requested. So please put that in the question log. We can have a conversation offline, but I think it's very important that as a board, now our fiduciary, our fiduciary responsibility is that we not only owe that to ourselves and this board, but to the community. So again, in order for us to be totally transparent, I would suggest, just a suggestion, that we also audit the counsel's office.
I'll make sure I add it.
All right, thank you very much. So again, I think I started from the screen and I went to my right to left. So I'm going to this time, I want to include the state independent monitor if he has any statements or questions. I'm sorry.
No questions, thank you.
All right, do you have any, I'm sorry, I missed you the first couple. Did you have anything you'd like to include that you would have included earlier? So I apologize for missing you.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Santiago.
No questions.
Vice President Malloy.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the audit report. I think I just have a concern more than anything else of just about the implementation of our Oracle system and just concerned about potential rising costs and running behind schedule, you know, not being able to achieve benchmarks potentially, and just, yeah, getting behind schedule. We've spent so much money on this and looking at how much that could cost us if we don't get on top of those things. So I am interested to know more about what the holdups are, on which end are those holdups occurring, and that's more for the question log, not to be answered tonight. But more than anything else, we've made this huge investment and would love to see a better return on the investment. Thank you.
Thank you. President Simmons.
Yes, thank you. This is also in alignment with Oracle implementation. Again, I think this might be a question, a conversation that we can have with administration, because I am interested in knowing what our contingency plan will be for, because whenever you're implementing a great system like this, when I say great, meaning all the great detail that comes with it, there's always kinks and things of that nature, and so I want to know what those contingency plans are. And just to level set for historical context, Anissa, can you kind of touch on the inception of Oracle as far as, and I don't even know if it's the inception I want to go as far back as, but it was implemented a number of years ago, or voted on to bring this particular system in, and I believe it came under ARPA dollars, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, is it ARPA dollars? Yeah, ARPA dollars. And so these are things that it's not something that if we didn't care for the system, we could even walk away from, right? It was something that before this iteration of the board was kind of brought in, and we've been pushing it forward. And this, at this point in time, we finally got to a space where we're trying to push it in and make it functional.
Actually, I want to actually create a chronology, because I do recall with the selection of Oracle, it was when we had CFO Pierce here. She was the individual who selected it, but I don't recall if there was actually ARP dollars at that time. I just don't remember, in fact, if it was there, but we had Monitor Jallo.
There was, Anissa.
There was? Okay.
Anissa, I just wanted to say there was, yes.
Thank you. So I do remember that was when there was the selection of the Oracle system, but certainly we can make an effort to try to provide a history and a chronology. I don't offhand have that, and I don't want to be incorrect, and I won't answer unless I know what I'm talking about. So
Yeah.
I am going to provide that or put that together in case someone on the team has such I know they're more involved in Oracle, the leadership team, than I. If they don't have one, then I'll try to put one together for you and provide that back to the
Yeah, I
board.
just think it's okay, important to have that context so that we understand where we've been, where we are, and potentially where we're going. But yeah, I think that puts some things puts it in place.
Oh, I'm
But
sorry.
yeah, I'll follow up with any other questions I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Griffin?
Yes, 1 second, please. First, I want to say I totally agree with what Commissioner Patterson was saying as far as general counsel in that department. And I don't know if this fits in anywhere but the Office of Accountability as well. It's not a recommendation. We should have that as commissioners. If we don't have that information and that data is not available to us, how are we making sound decisions as elected official? We can't do it by the seat of our pants, and that's what I think has been happening. We are not getting the information we need, and now that's why we have a failing district for so many years. So I just want to put that out there for the record. This information is something I've been asking for since last year, and still to no avail. I'm glad to see that we are finally making decisions to give the commissioners the information they need to make sure that our children are getting what they deserve, and we can see a return on our investments. I want to also add that I want to ask this question. Do we currently have a checklist for our vendors that we currently follow? Or is there no checklist? We just, like a checklist, say, hey, this is what we're looking for. This is what, like comparing, a comparison, quantitative and qualitative information regarding the vendors. Do we currently go by a checklist, or we just say, oh, this one looks good to us, and so we select it? So we don't have any type of checklist currently for the performance of the vendors that we select.
Are you trying to say criteria?
No, I'm trying to say, do we currently have a checklist that we go by? That is, you have a checklist. Is it this? Do they have this? This is what we want. This is what we're asking for from the district. Do you currently go by any type of checklist from the vendors, or is it just random?
So if you're talking about a contractual relationship, I can speak specifically for the ones that I've done. So as I work with General Counsel's office and we identify, there's an area in the contract that allows you to identify what you're going to evaluate the vendor on. And then I would specify, but it would be specific in each particular contract based upon both the type and with the services as to what exactly it is that we're looking for and how they would be evaluated. So that would be how we'd look at it. So I don't know if you'd call it a checklist, but the criteria would be identified in our contractual relationship, and General Counsel's office facilitates that and allows the operating manager, depending upon how specific they want to be, and I know I'm painfully specific on mine, but it depends upon the individual to understand what the contract is and then exactly what the criteria would be needed and for them to be assessed by.
So if I asked you for an example of one of your checklists you use, you would have that available to us, or you?
Not a checklist, but I can identify what the criteria is.
It's the same thing.
Okay,
Is it a
that's fine. Okay, I
checklist?
just
The
wanna make sure
criteria
I'm
is the
okay.
same thing. You're just using a bigger word.
Okay,
We want a
no problem.
checklist of the information. The checklist is a criteria. I'm just, for layman's terms, it's a checklist. We going by and say, this is what the criteria is for this. You check it out. It's just the same thing. So at the end of the day, we don't have one that we go by and haven't been going by that. That's my concern.
It would be dependent upon the contract.
Okay, but we don't currently have one. That's a blanket checklist that we would go by for each individual vendor based on the needs of this district. Because, do you
I understand your
what I'm saying?
question. I'm not the best person to answer your question.
Okay, who would be that? Who would be the person to answer the question? So we can make sure we can get the question answered for the general public. Who would that be,
Can you tell her
Anissa?
about the RFP?
So is this the RFP process? We do vendor evaluation before we select them for a contract.
Okay, so you do have a checklist.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
But that would only be
have-
for an RFP.
That's only for an RFP, correct?
So
That's
we
for the big
we
one.
do have that information that you go by.
Yes.
That's what I'm asking. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, do you have a second question, or is that it?
No, that was it.
Okay, wonderful. I'm going to go up to, Deputy, would you like to say something? I'm going to now go up to the screen to Commissioner LeBron. Any questions?
Yeah, not necessarily a question. I just want the listening audience to know that there is no data points that is not available to both the public and the commissioners. We actually don't have any more privilege to information than most people think we do. We get to have advice from legal counsel. We get to hear on human resource issues and legal issues and contractual issues behind the scenes. That's when we go into executive. But any data point is always available to the public. The problem is that people don't know how to find it or look for it, and that's a whole other conversation, but it is available. So I just want to say, because, there was a comment made on the record. I've been asking for that since last year. It's all available to the public. You have to know where to look for it. And then I just want to also remind the listening audience that it requires the full board to come to an agreement, or at least 4 for any type of audit or big lifts for this district. That's all, because it drives me nuts that we have commissioners who constantly put out misinformation. It just drives me nuts.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Elliott, did you want to ask those questions that you spoke of earlier at this point in time? Are you on mute, ma'am?
You muted, President.
So thank you. So yes, let me just start off by saying, this is significant. This is huge. And this whole project is something that the board needs to be looking at on a weekly basis. We're supposed to go live on this July 1st, and I'm hearing that we're not going to be able to go live on some of these things. And so,
Just so you're clear, Commissioner,
This is
you're talking
Oracle.
about Oracle for the audience.
Oracle.
Thank you.
Yes. And so, my concern is about what's delaying it, what we need to do in order to move it forward. What happened to cause this delay? There are just a number of things, and I'm going to be asking a lot of questions about this because, and I think the board we need to do this and put this in a special meeting. We need to put it in every meeting so that we're kept informed about this whole process. We've spent a lot of money on this. We've got consultants that we've spent a lot of money. Now I'm told, well, we're spending in the budget, but the fact is that we've got some delays. We've got some delays around HCI. And then what do they do? Do they have to use PeopleSoft in order before this gets started? So there are a lot of questions that I, as a board member, have because it's too much money that we are spending on this particular effort. I think it's a good for us to have all of our administrative systems working in one unit. I think that's a good thing. My concern is that somehow it looks like there has been some balls dropped. There have been some people who've come at the last minute to say we're not going to be able to do this in its fidelity. And so I think that we have to keep this in the forefront about this. And I'll just leave it there and until we go into executive session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think if I can also make one last statement relative to this. As a matter of fact, the President Simmons would like to make the last comment, but just dovetailing back on what you said, Commissioner Elliott, I think for me, I would like to know the initial cost of this Oracle, the present cost, cost overruns, and the future or long-term projected costs. So those are some of the questions that I also have too when we really dive deep into, Oracle. And you're right, you are correct. We should, as a board, as far as our fiduciary responsibility, keep an eye on this. So thank you for your comments. President Simmons.
Yes, thank you. And I do agree. I'm glad that Superintendent Strickland has continued to place Oracle updates in his weekly board report. And if you click on that link, it will show you the current schedule and updates. However, that does not negate the opportunity for additional conversation, which we must have. And I have certainly been consistent around trying to understand what the contingency plans are. So I am excited that we can dive in because we do have some concerns around this, but please make sure we are looking at our weekly board report that gives you updates on at least the project side of it as we need to unpack it further.
Can I say something though? Let me just sort of push
Sure.
back what the president said because I have been keeping up with this. As you all know, I've had some health issues, and so I haven't been keeping up as much as I should. But even when I went in to try to go on the link, it gave me an error, so that I had to get it from the chief of staff. So don't think that I'm not paying attention, have not been paying attention from its inception. But we're at the point when I heard at a meeting that this thing is not going to meet its timeline, that's when it brings up a concern for me.
I appreciate those comments, but my comments were my comments and they were not directed at anyone, but they were to provide clarity that we do receive weekly reports and that we do have opportunity for additional conversation, as I stated. And I stand there. Thank you.
Okay, so
I'm
we're
not
going
trying I'm
to,
not trying to argue with you about this. I'm just making a statement.
okay, all right, thank you. So at this point in time, Anissa, I think I've seen a motion. All right, so can I have a motion to accept the temporary employment services report and the 2025-26 audit plan?
So moved.
Second.
It's Vice President Malloy and President Simmons. Any comments and/or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Once again, all in favor? I'm sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? We have one commissioner missing, so that'll be 5 and 1.
Who's the nay?
Or correction, that'll be 6. One commissioner missing. Okay, so I think that completes my report. At this point in time, would the commissioners please complete your meeting survey before we leave the dais? This meeting will recess in executive session, which is closed to the public, to discuss matters related to matters permitted by Section 105 of the Open Meetings Law, or to receive the advice and counsel of the General Counsel. Can I have a motion to recess into executive session?
So move.
Motion by the president, seconded by whom? There's no executive session?
There is, they added.
Yes. Okay.
Second.
By the vice president. So at this time, for the general public, we will not be coming back into.
I'm sorry, did I hear the vote? I heard the
Gotta take
motion.
the vote.
Oh. Right. Okay.
All in favor? The motion in the second, we just didn't hear what the vote was. All in favor?
Favor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're recessing.
All right, so we're going to move into an executive session. We will not be coming back up to the dais, and we're going to close out, from executive session. So thank you very much to the audience.